This has been something for us that, we kind of stumbled into 5 years ago when it really wasn't heavily talked about. It wasn't a thing. There wasn't training on it. And basically out of necessity, because I was one of those guys that decided to quit my job without really having a plan in place, we had to do it. And so, this is something that we have continued to do and try to perfect over the years. And yeah, I mean, we're doing right now, like we're doing probably on average around 15 or so deals per month in 2 markets.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. So I think what I'm hoping you guys get from this is 3 different perspectives. I come from this buying over the phone completely from the perspective of sales process and sales training. Greg's perspective is he was doing it face-to-face and had to make the transition into going virtual over the phone. And Steve always did it virtual. So I think between the 3 of us, we're going to have a really well-rounded discussion and be able to lay out some good scripting and best practices, what's the same, what's different, and all of that stuff around this. And obviously with what's going on in the country today, I think it's important that we're going to have to operate over the phone. I think that goes without saying, right? And not only that, I think we're going to have to do more because we are going into a market where services of investors are needed more than probably at any other time in our lifetime. The way I see it is I'm sitting here seeing people's incomes are being cut off. Those who are distressed are even more distressed at this point. Those who weren't distressed may be seeing themselves in a distressed situation. And their only way out is this equity that they're sitting on. But they're not going to be able to sell their house through retail methods. Realtors won't be doing it out there. Doing their thing. We won't be having open houses. So we have all these people who I believe will be in situations where they need to take that equity and transform that into cash so they can continue to live their lives. And their only option is going to be for real estate investors to help them cash that equity out. So I think we're going into a time where these services are going to be needed more than at any other time, maybe for this next 3 to 6 months, maybe longer. And I also believe that because of that, we're going to have to learn to operate over the phone. Now, we're going to cover sales process primarily today. There's things like, are we going to use a quick claim deed and, instead of the standard contract and all that kind of stuff. Today, we're just concentrating on the conversation, the sales process, buying over the phone. So I want to set the stage for everybody here. Let's move into agenda. Here's what we're going to cover. Decision-making process, just real quick. Then I'm going to go into a step-by-step process overview. I'm going to give you a high-level sales process and a little bit of scripting to go along with it, just enough to make you dangerous. Our sales training is typically 12 weeks long, or if we do boot camps, it's 2 days. So obviously on this webinar, I can't give you 12 weeks worth of stuff, but I will give you a step-by-step outline and some scripting to go along with it that you can use today going forward. Steve Enns was also gracious enough to share his in-house scripting. So after I give you our basic process, Steve's going to show you and go through, hey, here's the scripting we use every day on the phone. And then after that, we're going to go through tips and strategies. Steve, Greg, and myself will all have, there's just a few things you really need to pay attention to about what's different about going virtual instead of face-to-face. And we'll all give you some tips and strategies, and it'll be more of a discussion session. And we'll wrap this thing up with Q&A. So you guys can, put your questions in that Zoom chat box there, and we'll do the best we can to go through as many questions as we can. So does that make sense to everybody? Y'all on board? Hit me up in the chat box. Let me know you guys are with me. Let me know you're ready to roll. And we're going to get this. I don't want to waste a lot of time. Guys, by the way, we're not here to sell anything. We don't have anything up for grabs. We're just going to go through and hopefully this provides everyone with some value.
Yeah. Hey, John, just one, I know that we're not selling anything here, but one thing I want people to know, I know you, and I know Greg knows the same. You were introduced to me through this real estate community several years ago. And I don't mind saying this because in my life, in my career, and especially with this, your sales training has had a profound impact on my business and my ability to communicate. In fact, the whole selling, I hated it a long time. I hated it. Sometimes I still get anxious about it, but what I went through and it created this whole new world for me. And now understanding human behavior is a passion of mine. But your training is by far one of the best things that I think anyone, regardless of your experience, should go through. And I'm not plugging it because I'm not getting anything out of it, but other than I want people to be the best that they can. And there's a lot of really bad real estate wholesalers and investors out there that don't know how to do this properly. And if you're armed with good training and surround yourself with great people, you're going to do well in this industry. So that's all I'll say about that. But again, yeah, it's a good training. I encourage people to sign up for it.
Well,
I gotta concur. Yeah, John, your training changed my life, man. I know this isn't a commercial here, but I gotta say, man, I got kicked out of an appointment like 3.5 years ago with my tail between my legs and stumbled upon your stuff. And I kid you not, man, it changed my life, and it's allowed me to do some pretty cool stuff. So.
Well, thank you guys. I don't want to get a big head, so I'm gonna thank you graciously, and then we'll push forward.
There you go.
All right, let's get into it.
So, all right. So decision-making process. First thing I want to see is a lot of people get tied up between, thinking that buying face-to-face is completely different from buying over the phone. So I just want to kind of throw this question at you. If you've got a friend or a buddy or a spouse, a wife, a husband, I want you to imagine if you were asking them what they wanted for dinner or where they wanted to go out to eat. Is that a completely different conversation if it's over phone, over text, over email, or face-to-face? Like, are you going to go into that just crazy different ways? It's the exact same question, right? It's the exact same conversation. Deciding whether or not to sell a house or sell it at a discount or sell it for cash to a wholesaler or someone else. It's the same decision that people have to be walked through, whether it's face-to-face, text, email, smoke signal, any way that you communicate. So the first thing I want everyone on this call to do is just realize it's the same conversation. Now, over the phone versus face-to-face, there will be some different challenges with communication and things like that we're going to get into. But at its core, it is the exact same decision process, right? So just think about your life, right? If you're deciding on what car to buy, whether you were looking online or looking at the dealership, you probably have the same basic questions. You probably want to know the same basic information. You're going to have the same drivers to wanting to buy a new vehicle. It doesn't matter. It's the same decision process. So the first thing I want us all just to wrap our heads around is it's not completely different. It's just a different mode of communication. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. We're going to communicate a little bit differently. There's going to be some finer points we're going to get into, especially at the tail end of this thing, but just let's leave it at that. So now let's get into a simple step-by-step process overview. And I'm going to take this one. I'm going to go through just our basic sales process. This is the same sales process we teach people online. This is obviously a very abbreviated version, but what I'm going to give you is kind of the step-by-step outline. And I'm going to give you some scripting as well, that if you want to use that scripting kind of as training wheels, just to kind of learn your own language and have something to say until you get comfortable with how you would say these things, use it. And this will be just a very good high-level overview of running through a sales call, regardless of it's face-to-face or over the phone. So I'm going to run through this, and then I'm going to give Steve more time because he's adapted this into a phone script, which I think is what everyone's here is for. So our sales training is, and by the way, Ali, yeah, we are recording this. I think I started recording a little late, but it's being recorded. We're going to distribute it. We're going to push it out and all that kind of stuff. I know there's probably at this point about 200 people who registered that are not going to be on, 250 people who registered, maybe 300 who aren't on this call. So we'll get it out to everybody. 4 basic steps of a sales call. Number 1 is set the stage. We're going to talk about how to kind of relieve pressure, get into the conversation, kind of flow into it nicely. If you guys are used to taking lead calls or sales calls over the phone, you might have realized there's a little bit of pushback usually in the beginning. Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable. So we want to slide into it the right way. After we do that, we're going to want to get into some motivation and urgency. That's the second major step of a sales process. What's their why? Why is that important? The more we talk about that, there's all kinds of psychological factors about how that increases the urgency to take action. It helps us understand. It helps us craft our offer. It's going to do a bunch of great things. After we do that, we're going to get into deal killers. Hey, if somebody wants to sell, they're ready to sell, they're motivated, what are the few things that might stop them or slow them down? We want to address those. So we're going to talk about the top deal killers, how to bring them up and get through them. And then we're going to go into close, which is usually a presentation and negotiation. So this is the basic outline of a sales process. And now I'm going to go through this step by step, just a little bit deeper, and I'm going to give you some sample scripting. Are you guys all with me so far? I know I'm blowing through this quick. I want to pack in as much as we can into as little bit of time as possible. And thank you so much for the feedback in that chat box. That's really going to help us know what pace to go at, when to speed up and when to slow down. So I appreciate that, Alicia, Parker, Stacy, everybody. All right. So setting the stage. Real quick, setting the stage, we just want to kind of tell people what to expect. Setting the stage is, you know what, think of a haunted house. If you go into a haunted house, you know everything around you is fake, but it's still scary. Why is it scary? It's scary because you don't know what's around that next corner, right? You don't know if that clown is going to jump out, the guy with the chainsaw, and the unknown we tense up, right? We tense up and we're scared. Same thing happens in sales. So the first thing we want to do is say, hey, by the way, there's nothing hidden around any corners. Here's exactly what to expect in this conversation. And you start to settle, you can settle down the conversation a little bit. So let me give you some sample scripting for this. Hey, listen, number one, thanks for taking the time to chat about this. Here's typically how this works. I'd love to ask you a few questions about your property, also about your specific needs, so I can really finish putting this offer together for you. And while I'm doing that, I want to make sure I structure it the right way for you specifically. After that, I'll just crunch the numbers, put everything together, and I'll give you an offer. If you love it, we can talk about next steps. If for some reason it's not going to work for you, that's completely okay too. If it works, that's great. And if not, at least we know we both gave this our best shot. So that's just a really high level overview of kind of sliding into a call and just letting people know what to expect. So you don't get 2 questions into it and you get someone who goes, hey, how long is this going to take? Why are you asking me these questions? We want to avoid that and keep everyone in what we call an okay state of mind. So that's the first set of sample scripting for getting into a call. You can also add time frame. Steve's going to add time frame in his, so when they know how long it's going to take, that helps as well. But this is just some basic sample scripting for sliding into a call. We all good there? I'm just looking for some thumbs up, some yeses. And
hey, John, can I contribute? Can I chime in here? This
Absolutely,
is, I think this is so important here, because when you're buying over the telephone, a lot of people you're going to get, occasionally you're going to get people being like, well, how are you supposed to buy my house if you've never seen it? Yada, yada, yada. That doesn't happen as much as you would think. I love the advance agreements on this in part of the sales process, because if someone's not willing to kind of go through the process with you, you're almost, having them self-disqualify themselves. And the people who are going to be cooperative are going to be, they know the agenda, they know the rules. And you're setting yourself up to really be speaking to the right types of sellers. And it's just so powerful, especially over the phones when you're
the other thing there too, and just to be, there's going to be a lot of information coming at you, everyone who's on this right now. So you got to take what you like and use it. So I always say, take 1, 2, 3 things and try them, right? And practice them. And then when you get good at that and you figure out if it works, then do the next. But when it comes to this, it's really setting the stage as far as the tone of the conversation. And you're going to have a lot of people push back immediately, right? Because maybe you're calling them for the first time, or maybe they're calling you. If they're calling you, it's a much different opening because they're calling you, and maybe they're upset about a letter, or you never know. They get a lot of letters. They speak to a lot of people. So they might be a little bit frustrated at first. And you really want to try to diffuse that as quickly as possible, and bring in more of a tonation that is really kind of soothing. And look, I understand you probably get a lot of people calling you about your property right now. And I just want to go over just a few things, especially in this time when everything's kind of just up in the air and it's very confusing. No one knows what to do. You're probably worried about your health, loved one's health, and moving right now might be kind of a stressful thing for you, especially when you don't know if what's going to happen with the economy. Well, these are things that we have all figured out, and we have solutions for you. So whatever the situation is, please just be open and honest with me, because communication, I think we both can agree that by being effective communicators, we can make things happen together. And just by setting that kind of pace and that tone sets it up. I don't care how angry someone is. And if they're still angry, I'll be like, look, you sound a little frustrated right now. When would be a better time for us to talk?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to get through to that person at that time.
Right.
Totally.
I think that's great. And by the way, I know in this world of real estate, we all measure things by number of deals. So I did want to make this point real quick. Greg, although his deal flow is kind of low because that's the business he wants to run, for those of you who don't know, Greg actually provides all of the upper end training for our sales training. So when clients want one-on-one stuff, Greg is the one and only person who provides that. So Greg actually trains the sales teams of the top investors in the country. Investors doing 500 plus deals a year. When they want to improve on acquisitions, Greg Helbeck's the guy that they call in. So I just know deal flow doesn't matter, but I know that's a way a lot of us judge individuals in this space. So I want to let you know, Greg has his personal business and it's a lifestyle business, but he is also our big guns for one-on-one coaching and has made tremendous impact with the best investors in the country. So I didn't want to sell Greg short. Just want to make sure everybody knows that.
That's all right.
I know you don't have any ego.
I like
Greg,
the low volume, high margin. Yeah, that's my style. But I appreciate it, man.
Let's move into the next piece. So once we kind of set the stage, we've got an opportunity to, we got to find out about the house, right? But we also want to build rapport. And this is a great place for it. Why aren't we jumping right into motivation and those things? Because we want to kind of build that rapport. As Steve said, it might start off a little bit rocky. So we want to build rapport. And a great way to build rapport, a nice, safe thing to talk about is the house, right? Instead of diving into personal situations and that stuff, we can actually take a few minutes to do a virtual tour of the house, a virtual walkthrough, if you will. And it's a nice, safe, high-level, non-threatening conversation. So while it's important we know about the house, I recommend you take a virtual tour, even if you know everything you need to know about the house, because it's a tremendous opportunity to build rapport. So good sample scripting. After I set the stage, I start out with something like, hey, listen, would you mind just telling me a little bit about the property? And as we go through, you can guide them like, well, we can start with the kitchen. What about the outside? What about the roof? Have appliances been changed recently? You can guide them through that tour, right? But more importantly than that is really getting them to talk and share. The more they talk and share, the more rapport is going to be built. Now, there's all kinds of ways to build rapport when we're talking about matching and mirroring, and all those things are super effective. But another super effective way to build rapport is just to get people talking. The more they talk, especially as they talk about themselves, the better they feel and they associate that with you. So it's a super simple way to build rapport. Now, if you do have commonalities and all that kind of stuff, that's fantastic. If you can mirror, that's fantastic. But this is something anybody can do. So as they start to share, ask simple questions. Really, how long you live there? Listen, well, tell me this. What's your favorite thing about the house, the area, the neighborhood? Stuff just as simple as once they say something, go, wow, really? Yeah, you're kidding me. Just to encourage them to talk more, that is going to do a tremendous amount of rapport building. Greg, Steve, do you have anything to add kind of around a virtual tour and building the rapport and that type of thing?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where, like I said, I said this earlier. It's like, oh, how you gonna buy my house if you haven't seen it? If that person has that, if you can really get that person to do most of the talking by mostly mirroring them and asking open-ended questions, which is a lot of the sales process, you're gonna be very surprised, and people, especially people on this webinar who have never done the over the phone model, you're gonna be so surprised on the amount of credibility and rapport you can build with someone without ever seeing them. I'll give you a quick example, and then I'll let Steve take over. I did a house in Austin, Texas, with 21 heirs. It was like a Harry title property. I never met a single person, and I was best friends with all of them. And just because we focused on the rapport. So, I mean, never met anyone, and this was all over the phone, and the deal was like a really long deal because of the title, but I never met anyone. And it's because I used the tools to build that rapport. And because of that, it didn't matter that I was, living in New York at the time, or, it didn't matter. So you guys got to understand that you can do the same amount of rapport building on the phone, and you can scale it a lot easier.
Yeah. there's this whole part is super important, because I look at it like, you know, the basics of a house is, you know, you're going to get that information. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, you know, 1,500 square feet, needs a new roof, all that stuff. I mean, that is what everyone asks, right? Those are the questions that everyone's going to want to know, and they go through their little checklist, and okay, and then there's the pause, and like, well, yeah, what about the plumbing? And so, you know, everyone does that, and it's important to do, right? But the way that I like to do it, and for me, it's a very important thing, because I want to try and get someone out of their logical brain as quickly as possible. And the way that I have found to do that is by really trying to activate their imagination. And so one of the things that we do here, and that I train my team, my acquisitions team, is okay. So let's just imagine, John, for a second here. I mean, obviously, you and I are not in the same. You know, we're not together, and I'm not physically going to be able to see your house. Oh, by the way, side note here, I actually tell people I don't live in their market, that I do deals all over North America, that I live in Vancouver, Canada. And so don't feel like that's a deterrent. In fact, if anything, it shows a little bit of credibility towards, hey, I can do this anywhere, sort of thing. But so I say, like, look, I'm all the way, I'm 3,000 miles away from you. Your weather's nice, it's raining here, it's cold in winter. But let's just imagine for a second we are together. I'm standing outside of your front door right now. You open the front door and I come into your house. Take me around your house. What do I see? And right then and there, it goes from logical thinking, and what I'm doing here is what's called a pattern interrupt, and I'm interrupting them. I'm interrupting whatever thought they're thinking. They're trying to guess at what I'm going to say next. And most people will go into, okay, well, how many bedrooms, how many baths, all this other stuff. If I have someone who has motivation, I will go through that process with them, and I will have them walk me through the property as though I'm already there. And the information that you get from them, and then actually what happens is you build this connection with someone by going through it, and you start to kind of listen to some of the tonation and maybe some of the hesitations, and you ask them, you know, through the script, like, you know, is there anything else? And you do the mirroring and stuff like that. But what you're doing there is you're getting them out of the standard checklist type questions, and you're actually physically putting the two of you together. Well, not physically, but it seems like it. Your mind does not know the difference, and they won't either. So I'll end it there, but
yeah,
very important.
Well said. So what we covered so far, real quick, just nothing crazy or insane, right? It's set the stage, just tell people what to expect, and then we're going to do a virtual walkthrough and make sure we use that time to build some rapport and break the pattern. As Steve said, I think great contributions by both. At that point, once we have that rapport built, once we have a basic understanding of the house, it's time to kind of transition and begin the actual selling part. Which is probably not what you expect, but I'm going to get into it. So a good way to make that transition is to kind of set it up with something like this. Like, listen, is it okay if I ask you a few questions about your situation so I can really figure out the best way to structure an offer for you and also make sure I'm getting you the most for your property, right? So that's a good way. It just kind of, it changes that mind frame. We warn them, hey, we're gonna ask about your situation, and the reason why we're doing it is we're giving them a benefit. We want to make sure we structure this specifically for you, and by the way, get you the most we can for your property. So that's a way I like to kind of break up the conversation and kind of change to this next phase. Now, the first part of this next phase is diving into motivation. There's a couple reasons we do this. We want to do it because number one, we want to get it all out on the table. Not only do we have to understand their motivation, we have to make sure they understand their motivation. Until we ask about it and we start to pick all these pieces apart, people never really think about, you know, how is this impacting me, my loved ones? How long can I put up with this? How has it impacted me so far? They never really go through that thought process. So this is a really good way for us to understand what the motivation is, because basically we need to understand their problems if we're going to solve them. We're going to use this information when we present our offer. We're going to connect all these dots, but we also need them to fully understand their situation, look at it from a new set of eyeballs, a new perspective, and truly, you know, put some value on staying or going. In addition to this, when we look at neuroeconomics, which is the science of decision-making from all perspectives, from psychology, the rest of the social sciences, biology, and so on, when we talk about motivation, it activates the part of the brain where people actually take action and makes decisions. It encourages people to take action. They feel an urgency to take action on these things that they're thinking about. So there's some, weird sciencey stuff behind it when it comes to decision making, but high level, we need to understand exactly what their situation is, and they do. Motivation is not, this is the biggest mistake I see in real estate. Most people treat motivation like a checkbox, and they just go, hey, what's your story? They go, I'm getting divorced, and they go, check, motivation is there.
Move to close.
Yeah. That's not it. You did not, you are scratching the surface. We don't understand the slightest bit about it, and we're not doing the proper things with motivation. So that a checkbox is good maybe for a lead manager when they're just passing it on to the acquisition manager, and they just, hey, was there a sign of motivation? Yeah, checkbox. But when we're talking about making sure we're locking down deals, this is where the conversation starts, not ends. So let me give you a few different types of questions. There's 3 questions we use to gauge motivation, to dive into motivation, to get people mentally ready to make a decision. They're problem, impact, and picture perfect questions. Now, these are so powerful that when there's studies of salespeople, there's been tons of studies of salespeople and what makes an effective salespeople. One thing in this entire world, in all sales professions, with all salespeople, there is one measure, one thing you can look at that predicts the best from the average, from the worst. That one thing is the use of these 3 types of questions: problem, impact, and picture perfect. Impact being the one that is the best predictor of who has success in sales. In fact, if you can tally up how many of these 3 types of questions a salesperson asks on their sales calls in any sales situation, you can predict pretty accurately how long they've been in sales and how mature of a salesperson they are. So do not overlook these 3 questions, okay? So problem, picture perfect, and impact are the 3 types. I'm gonna give you some examples, okay? Problem questions, it's kind of like, it leads you to that checkbox, right? It leads the conversation. What is their surface level motivation? So the way I always like to ask is by saying something great, and then almost acting like I don't believe why they might be selling their house. And it doesn't matter what condition the property is in. There's always something good to be said about the house. Maybe it's a junk house. They just got into it. You can still say, something made you decide to move into that house, something you really liked. Why in the world are you thinking about selling? You might say, listen, you put in a lot of work to this house. Obviously, the way you talk about it, how much time, effort, and money you put into it, it's been something you've been really focused on. Help me understand why in the world you're thinking about selling it at this point. Or it might be something like, listen, you've lived here 30, 35 years. You raised a family. Memories in this house I can't imagine. Why in the world would you even consider selling at this point? And this starts to target in the conversation. It gives us some bearings. It gives us something to work off of. So it just kind of gives us our bearings. And what we're looking to do is figure out where someone is. And then we're going to go to picture perfect questions and find out where they want to be. And when we get to the offer, we're going to bridge that gap. Hey, this is where you said you are, problem questions. This is where you want to be, picture perfect. Here's my offer to help you get there. So that's just a little preview into the future.
One of the things, John, and I think why people don't like to dig into this, or they look past it, and very important here. So I want to be very clear on this, because if you get this one thing, this could be one of the most important things here, because people just touch on motivation and then they move past it, because what they're afraid of is that they might find something that will kill the deal.
That's gold.
And if you find that thing, well, then I don't get the deal. Well, if you find that thing and it is a true thing, whatever it might be, and it's a deal killer, well, you've just saved yourself a lot of time. But if you are the one who uncovers that thing and provides a solution to that person, it doesn't matter who is coming through that door next or who answers the phone next. They don't care. because you have just built that emotional connection with someone, which is something that is a basic human need. And I won't go into the psychology of it, but people seek few things, right? And one is that connection, and to be understood and to be heard. And what if you can get to that point where you can feel that pain, whether it might not even be pain, but to uncover that part and to really spend some time here in that is key.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've trained now, we've got 1,400 investors now in our training. And every single week I get an email or a Facebook message that says, you will not believe this. We just got a deal for 20, 25, 30K less than the highest offer. And I said, why in the world did you decide to go with us when you could have got more money? And the answer is always some version of, you are the one who took the time. I feel like you're the only one who truly understands my situation. And it's that need to be understood. And we want to deal with people and work with people who understand and care. So I think that's a great point. So these problem questions are a great way to kind of slide into it. Now, next is impact questions. Impact questions just take these problem and these picture perfect questions to the next level. It's just, you're just asking for more information about it. So an impact question could be, hey, is that a big deal to you, Steve, or is that a little deal? Or it could be, so how long has that been going on? How long have you been thinking about that? Or, man, I got to ask, how do you feel about that? Or how's that feel? And it just takes the depth of the conversation a level deeper. And the more impact questions you can ask, and as you can see on the screen, these are not complex questions, but it just keeps the conversation going, right? It's the same, you know, people get tied up with these impact questions, but just think of it this way. If you're sitting down for lunch with the best friend and the best friend says, listen, I'm going through some really tough stuff at work. Would you just stop there and go, are you going to order the sandwich for lunch? Are you going to have the chicken? No, you'd be like, tell me what's going on, man, right? It's completely natural. So don't get so tied up with this feels unnatural. It's actually the most natural thing in the world. Again, if you're with a friend and they say, listen, I'm going through some really tough stuff, you would be a complete jerk if you just dismissed it and said, okay, check box. Do you want to get dessert? Right? Like that's what's not natural. So these impact questions, you just go a step further. And then next is picture perfect questions, right? Problem questions are kind of, where are we at? What's the issue here? You know, why are we talking in the first place? And picture perfect questions, we just want to figure out what a win scenario looks like. We just want to figure out where they want to get to, what they're trying to accomplish. So it could just be simple questions like, listen, if you decide to sell to me or to anybody else, why would you? What are you going for? Or listen, if you do sell, where do you think you're going to go? Or, you know, when would you like to? What would you like the whole process to look like? What do you think you'll do? We're just trying to get them to envision what that picture perfect scenario looks like. If you look at car sales, this is why you take a test drive, right? If you've ever taken a test drive, what happens when you test drive that vehicle? You're like, I got to drive this to work every day. I love it. You start to picture yourself in that scenario. That takes motivation over the top because now you're feeling it, you're living it, you're seeing it. This is picture perfect. It's the same thing casinos do, right? They get you in that mindset of, I can live like this. This can be me. And then we're motivated to take action. So we want to find out their picture perfect. And once we start to get in there, we go a layer deeper with the impact questions. How long have you been thinking about that? You know, have you thought a lot about that? Listen, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into this. How long have you been thinking about it? If you pull that off or start, get close to it, what would that be like? Is that big? Is that little? Is that something you care about or something that, doesn't matter either way? And Kim and everyone else, this will be available for replay, but that's where we're going. So I need to push through this. We're going to give you Steve's script in a second, but listen, set the stage, build rapport, dive into motivation, just kind of ask, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And tell me more about each one of those things is a good way to sum this up. Steve, Greg, anything to add to this before I push through to the next slide?
Yeah, it's really important when you're, obviously people are going to have different exit strategies and whatnot, but when you get them into a situation where they're making emotional decisions by answering these questions, it's so much easier to, at the end of the day, and I do this on almost every single sales call I do, is just reframe that conversation. What's more important to you, Mr. Prospect? And you just get them crystal clear by using these questions on the ultimate decision that they have to make. And whether you buy their house or not, or whatever it might be, they're very thankful to have a conversation with you because you help them identify what makes the most sense for them. And sometimes it's going to be doing a deal with you, and sometimes it's not going to be doing a deal with you. But, you know, I've had so many sellers tell me personally, hey man, I really appreciate this conversation because I got crystal clear on what exactly I need to do now. And, you know, whatever happens, happens. So this is powerful if you really implement this. And this is the hardest thing to do on the sales call. But once you master this, it's like you have a ninja power.
And Greg's talking about reframing, which we don't have time to get in on this call, but I'll try to give you a super high level 30-second overview. What reframing is focusing on a different question, a different problem. Most investors who are okay, they're focused on, I've got to convince the seller that what I can pay for their house is a fair price.
Yeah.
We take price out of this whole conversation because it doesn't matter. When we start gravitating more towards price, here's how the conversation goes. When you have this conversation, listen, if you want to get the most money for your house, I'm not your guy. You can list this thing and sell it retail and do all the repairs yourself, and you'd make the profit that I'd make. That's what I'd suggest you do. But what I'm hearing you say is it's not just about that. Here's what I'm hearing, and here's a decision you have to make. You're tired. You don't have the money for repairs. You're stressed out. This is taking a toll on your physical health, your personal life, the relationship with your wife. You've been dealing with this for 2.5 years. You're sick of it, and you're scared about what happens with something with my job, or if there's another repair I need to make. On the flip side of that, there's, do I want to get rid of all that, take care of all those problems, or is it more important to me to keep dealing with that, stick into this another year or so, find the money, put it in, and then get every dollar possible? I can't make that decision for you, but that's the decision you have to make, is what's more important for you right now? Is it the first set of issues, right? You can only deal with one of them. Is it, I want it out of here quick. I want the stress relief. I don't want to worry about the repairs. I just want it off my plate. Or is it getting every dollar out of it? Because if it's getting every dollar out of it, you're going to have to, suck it up and find the money and do this yourself for a year. And if that's it, that's the way I recommend you go. But if the other problems are more important for you to solve short term, that's what I can help you with. So that's reframing. Nothing to do with proper. So if you're getting beat up on, well, Zillow says this, another investor offered this, then in all those types of things, it's because you're not reframing. You're not asking the problem, impact, and picture perfect questions. So let's push through. I want to make the most out of our time. Next, once we've got motivation, we want to figure out, is there anything that might kill the deal? Is there anything that we want to figure out if we can do something about it, right? There's deal killers that we can easily work into our offer and fix if we just find out what they are, like house cleanup or being flexible on move out dates and things like that. And there's stuff that we can't, and we deal with that through reframing. But basically, if something's going to kill the deal, we want to know about it so we can figure out if we can do something about it. Here's my sample script rolling into it. Hey, listen, the money piece of this it's usually the easiest. Even if we want to buy, though, you want to sell, the money works for both of us. Sometimes there's a few things that kind of get in the way and prevent us from doing anything. Is it okay if we just talk about those things for a moment? So this is our transition. Now we got motivation up, urgency to take action up. We know where they are, where they want to be, and why those things are important through our problem, impact, and picture perfect questions. And now we just move into what might get in the way of this thing from closing. So I'm gonna pick up the tempo just a little bit so we can, because we got a lot of good stuff we want to get through. This will be available for replay, so you can always replay it. But risk and discomfort's a major deal killer. So the way I like to ask about that, to see if there's anything that's going to get in the way or anything I need to address in my offer, is here's two versions of it. Listen, if you decide to sell, what would be your biggest worry about the entire process? Or listen, if you decide to sell, we agree on the number and all that kind of stuff, what would you still need to figure out before you could actually move? What are the next set of problems you're going to have to wrap your head around and figure out how you're going to tackle? So this dives into the biggest sources of risk and discomfort that might cause people who even want to sell to go, let me think about it. Let me figure some stuff out and not get back to you. The next one is going to be relationships. This could be with realtors, with other investors, with family members, with tenants, anyone who might impact the deal. Oftentimes, the decision maker has less input in the decision than those around them, their family members, their spouse, other people, you know, in probate cases in the family and things like that. So the way I like to dive into relationships is, let me ask you this. You're thrilled about the offer we put together for you today. You decide for some reason, you know what, enough's enough. I want to move forward immediately. Just imagine we get to that point. Would there be anyone who might be even a tiny bit upset that you didn't at least kind of let them know what you were doing first? And what this is going to uncover is there an influential person in this decision-making process? Well, yeah, my dad would kill me. Or, well, yeah, you know, my wife, if I did something without talking to her, then she, you know, it wouldn't happen. And now we know to dive into that conversation. Even if that person's not there, you can simply follow it up with, well, what's that conversation going to sound like when you tell her about what you're thinking about doing? What's most important to her? You know, what would she hear where she gave a thumbs up, or what would she have to hear to go, I don't think this is best for you? What does she want to see you get out of this? What's the main goal from her perspective? And when we find out what's important to these influencers, then what we can do is we work that into our offer, right? We make sure we address what the influencer is going to want addressed, right? These things are important to you. These are your motivations. These are your deal killers. To your wife, who I know is important, she's going to ask you about this stuff. Here's how we cover it. These are the things she's concerned about. Here's how we're going to take care of those things. And we button it all up. We make sure we cover everything. A good sales process, what it does is it increases our odds of closing every closable deal. Next is competition and other offers. Just because you don't bring them up doesn't mean they don't exist. Doesn't mean that these people don't know about them. So let's dive into them. I like to dive into it this way. You know, finally, I'm not your only option. And at this point, I don't think either of us are really sure if we're going to be your best option or not. Let's just talk through the other options real quick. Have you considered just listing the place, doing the repairs yourself? Could you keep it and rent it out? Would that get you to where you want to be? Do you even have to sell? Could you keep this thing another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And what we're going to do is systematically eliminate mentally the other options, or we're going to find out who your competition really is. Either way, you're in a better place than before you ask these questions. Now, if they're not eliminated, if they haven't taken the mental energy to ask themselves these questions, you're going to get some form of a maybe or think it over, because they're going to have to answer these questions before they feel like your option's a good option. Worst case scenario, you find out they are leaning towards one of these, and now you know who your competition is, and you know how to go up against your competition.
John, this is gold.
Deal killers,
Yeah.
Greg or Steve. I know I'm pushing through this quick, but this is being recorded, and we got a long way to go.
This is so critical, because I'm going to talk about like kind of qualifying stuff later. But when you can bring this up sort of as soon as possible, after you have some sort of rapport built, you know, when you can really trust each other, this is going to help you get to the truth so quickly. And there's a lot of times where, like, you know, you think they're going to list it or they're going to keep it, and you actively bring this to the surface. And a lot of new investors are like, oh my God, well, what if they're actually going to list it? Then, you know, I might plant the seed in their mind that they weren't thinking about originally. Like, if they were going to do any of these things, like whether you bring them up or not, they're going to be there. So the quicker you can bring them up and self-identify them, it's just going to help the conversation regardless.
Yeah, no, I agree. I won't get too much into this because I know we're going to go through the script and we have a lot left to go. So I'll touch on this when we go through the script.
Awesome. I'm sitting by my fireplace and I am burning up, so I'm going to get up and move. Let's keep going through this thing. Next is our solution or our offer. Hey, you guys might get a glimpse of the behind the scenes Amanda Martinez. If any of you are in her sales training, you have conversed quite a bit with her. But let's get into the solution or the offer. Now, here's the deal. The solution or the offer should just be connecting the dots in between everything you just talked about. That's it. We're just going to present our offer in a customized way that is perfect for this person. Basically, it's going to be, listen, when we talked about, you know, your situation, you mentioned this motivation and the impact, why it was important to you. Here's how we want to structure this offer so we can deal with that. And you also wanted to make sure that you had flexibility. So here's how we're gonna structure the offer and write it in so you have all this flexibility. And you know what? You mentioned this deal killer. You mentioned you were really worried about credit and time to move and stuff in the house. So I'm going to put this in writing in the offer. This is how we deal with this for you. And when you get through this and you connect the dots between your offer and every one of their reasons why they would move and every one of their deal killers, the reasons why they wouldn't, it feels like it is a custom solution. It is meant just for them. But we need to connect the dots and say, you have these things you want to accomplish, and these are the things you're concerned about. So taking every one of those things in mind, here's my offer. At the end of the day, you're still going to write a check. There might be some of the basic things like clean out, flexible time to move, and all those things, but it's customized. You got to connect the dots for that person. This is far different from, I can give you 35K. What do you think? No, okay, see you later. Anything else? Again, Greg or Steve, I'll let you chime in if you want to about presenting the offer.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of questions come up here about calculating offers and doing all that sort of thing, and we'll get into that because we actually do that most of the time over the phone. And there's certain situations where we'll take it and give them an offer while on the phone with them, and really what we're looking is just getting that time with them and going through it with them while on the phone, and also just to get a general gauge of where are they in this conversation as far as price goes. We'll dive into that, and then because I see a lot of questions about this, and then also we'll get into what happens if you need to take it and offline and do it again. But very important here with this, because you're restating the motivation and the pain points and all those sorts of things, so that you're bringing it, like John said, you're bridging it together. And when you're doing this, you have to remember, you're not doing this in person. You're not physically in front of that person to read them. And so while you're going through this, you're listening, and you're listening to auditory cues, right? And you're like, pauses, right? Pauses are good things. Don't disrupt a pause. Let the person think. They will talk. And the thing that you're looking for are those sighs, or the or no, that's not good enough. And then you mirror, oh, that's not good enough. Like, just very important not to go too quick through this part here is basically what I'm getting at.
And a great thing I want to add to what Steve said, those sighs and things like that, use them to your advantage. That is a cue. If someone sighs, pause and say, it sounds like something's on your mind.
Exactly.
Right? Because something is on their mind. Let them speak. You will learn so much this way.
I'm sensing a little bit of hesitation. It sounds to me like there's something else there.
Yeah.
It sounds like, it feels like it, all of those things. I'm feeling that you're upset right now, or those are good things, because it initiates a further conversation, and they start to explain themselves, and you want all of those things.
Yeah, and you're getting to the truth, and you're getting them to show you how you need to sell them custom. Like it's like if you get this objection out now, well, you got to deal with it now, because if you don't deal with it and you just brush it under, try to brush it away, it's going to come back up. And they're telling you all their concerns while you're on the phone when you have that momentum of the sales call, instead of just, hoping for the best. So this is really like high level emotional intelligence.
Awesome. So we'll keep pushing. We're going to get to Steve's script in a second. After this, we don't have time to get into negotiating details. Biggest negotiating factors are going to set a price anchor. And then if the negotiation goes on, decreasing increments, probably the biggest thing is a give and take in negotiations and an odd final offer. There's some non-financial concessions. Read Chris Voss's book. He's great on negotiating. These are the negotiating tactics, probably price anchoring, give and take, and then the odd final offer are going to be the three biggest that have the massive impact. And then all the way through this, you can use things called psychological reactance, tactical empathy, so you don't get pushback and all those things. Wish we had time to cover all those things today. We don't, but this should give you a basic framework. And now we're going to move into Steve's script, which will take this just a layer deeper and give you a little bit more context. but this should make you dangerous and help you transition from buying face-to-face to buying over the phone and give you a really good feel for how this should all go. So that's basic sales process right there. That's what the best of the best are using in the industry right now. Now, this is what Steve in Vancouver actually uses to buy throughout the United States. Steve, I know you have this in your script for a reason, so you tell me when to go through these slides, and I'll.
Oh yeah, you could. That first little part is something I just put in for the team, just to kind of have it front and center there. I apologize in advance if there's any sort of spelling or grammar errors here in this. But yeah, so this is kind of what we use. Training guys, they stick with the script, and it brings elements of what we've discussed here today, in the script, and make it your own, right? And take what you like from it, and leave the rest. So you can go on to the next part here. That's just a little blurb. Okay, so here we are, right? So this is very important, right? People, you set the tone, right? And that's the thing, is be excited, be confident, be assumptive, like, bring that energy to the phone call, and be that person that people like to be around. So, there's two different things here. Outbound, if, you're making an outbound phone call, whether it's a follow-up call, first time, we say that, we're one of the senior buying specialists here at Tallbridge. You may just say, hey, I'm Greg Hellbeck, or, I'm Josh Alter, whatever, my business partner. And your file came across my desk. So when we're getting, outbound, inbound, this is how we structure it, because we have, literally quite a few leads coming in a day. So first thing we do is, like, I'm just calling you back, basically, I want to confirm some of the property details, and I apologize in advance if some of what we're discussing is redundant, because we have, and the reason why I have this is because we have VAs and cold callers and lead managers that take this initial information down first. So, I want to just cover that right away, because someone might be like, well, I've already explained this to you. Look, I apologize in advance, that, this is redundant and those sorts of things, but I just want to make sure I have all of the correct facts so I can give you the best offer. And now we go into setting stage. Once they say, yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, great. So typically people want to know, who we are, what we do and how much we want to offer. And John, I got this from you. So these kinds of things, or those kinds of things, do you have those same types of questions? Yeah, no, sure, okay, great. So then we go into, okay, first, what are we? We're a real estate company. We work with a group of investors, which is, this is what we do, and we buy in as-is condition, all cash, can close in your time frame, sometimes in as little as a few days. There's no hidden fees or commissions or closing costs or anything like that. Does that make sense? Our process, we say, takes about 7 minutes, which it can. Sometimes more often than not, it takes longer than that.
Let me go back.
Yeah, I don't know how detailed do you want me to get in this here? Because
I mean, we're going to provide everything to everyone. I'll get everyone on this call the slide decks.
Okay.
But I just want you to I want them to feel, they saw a sales process, and I want them just to kind of feel how you put it into words.
Okay, so because I don't want to rush through it then, because I'll go into more of how we do it. Okay, so I'm talking to John here right now, and I'll say, hey, John, firstly, we're a real estate investment company. We work with a large group of investors. We buy in as-is condition. We pay all cash and close in your time frame, sometimes as little as few days. John, there's no hidden fees here with us. There's no, back end sort of funny things going on, and no real estate commissions, and we cover all standard closing costs. Does that make sense? Great. Well, our process takes about 7 minutes, 7-10 minutes. Is now a good time? Yes. Okay. So then we get into just, process is very super simple. I just need to ask you some basic questions about your property, learn a little bit more about your situation, and then from there, we can kind of discuss next steps.
So now he set the stage again there. Set the stage a couple of times there, actually. Very beginning of the call. Now he's setting the stage again for where the call goes from here. It's awesome. Go ahead.
And then we have the options, right? So going back to what we were talking about before. Okay, great. After that, I'll let you know what the options are, and you can let me know what you'd like to do from there. If at any stage, and this is something that John goes through, if at any stage you feel like we're not a right fit, and this is very important because I'm making it okay for them to say no. And the moment that you do that, you give that person the feeling of like, hey, you know, like, it's okay to say
Autonomy,
no.
security.
Exactly. So, hey, if at any stage you don't feel like this is the right fit, like you don't like me, for instance, perhaps it's something I said, perhaps I can go back and try to fix where I went wrong. Or at the end of the day, if the answer is no, then that's okay too. It's all about communication. And I'm sure you'll agree that open communication is what makes everything go smoother. That is just a blanketed statement that everyone agrees to. And that's the reason why that's there, is because you'll get someone to agree to that. And when they agree that open communication is important, guess what? They're going to communicate with you more openly.
Awesome.
So here we go into, okay, contact information. So just asking, you know, again, for them to verify the full name, the address, you know, best phone number, email, so we can email offer and any contact information too. You know, very cool thing here that we do to try to get that level of engagement is we use a service called BombBomb, and it is a screen share. You can send an email, you can send a text message, and you can brand it, personalize it, whatever, and it connects you with the seller very quickly. I can give you guys a connection there if you want later, but it's a really good service. A lot of analytics tied to it too, so you can see open rates and stuff like that in emails and that sort of thing. So once you go into that, now here is the property condition. So I'm just going to go run through a few questions with you about the property. You know, and we go through the property. Obviously, we're not together in your property, but let's imagine for a moment we are. What's the general condition of the house? I have them walk me through the condition of the home, that sort of thing. You know, have some fun with this, right? Is basically what I want to say to you. You know, think of like Walt Disney for me is, you know, he used his imagination to create. And if you think of every interaction that you have with someone as that ability to create something memorable, and even if it's just a good conversation or something like that, you know, you will leave a lasting impression on someone. And really that's what you want to do. So anyways, going through the questions, we go through the questions. I'm looking for things that might be an opportunity for me to dig into a little bit more. And once we go past the questions, we get into motivation. And so this is kind of, you know, what John was talking about as well. So this sounds like a property we might be interested in. So I'm letting them know, like, we're interested in this property. You know, let me ask you, like, why are you thinking about selling it? Okay, so that is like the gateway into a whole list of other things that you can go into. You know, diving deeper, like, really, how long have you been thinking about selling? Or it could, whatever, you know, whatever the situation is, I always just try to mirror what they've said. So if John says, yeah, I'm relocating. Oh, you're relocating. It just initiates more conversation, more dialogue. And what I'm really looking for is to go, you know, several layers deep with that and find out, okay, well, is it the relocate? Okay, so if they're relocating, what is causing that relocation? What is it that's behind that relocation? Because John, you're not going to relocate for just any reason. There's probably a handful of reasons why you might relocate. I know you love your area, but it might be, you know, a family situation, you know, a loved one, a business opportunity. There could be many different reasons, but finding out why that relocation is happening is super important. So really getting into that, and there's things that you can do, like books that you can read and trainings you can have that can really help you understand how to dig into motivation and the types of questions that you can be asking for that.
Yeah, so the one thing to look up there is Socratic questions. If you guys remember Socrates, one of the three major philosophers, and the way he taught his students was just by asking questions. So Socratic questions is just a real good thing to look up. You can even just find lists of Socratic questions, and that's how you can dive deeper really easily.
Yeah, and I had a note here actually to talk about Socratic questions, so I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, very good. Now you go into timeline. Now this is something here that you play around with, but it gives me an idea of the motivation, okay? And it comes in a different kind of angle. So now I have this motivation as far as understanding their situation, but now I want to see, okay, well, how quickly are they wanting to sell? And that's going to gauge my next steps. So, if you did decide to sell to us or to anyone else, when would you like to do so within the next, 30, 90, 60 days or further out? If I have somebody that starts saying, sooner the better. Oh, sooner the better. Just a simple mirror. Oh, sooner the better. Oh, 60 days. Oh, 60 days. And then you find out more. And oh, so if I came to, if I were able to come to an agreement with you, would 30 days be okay? Or why 60 days? There might be something there, right? And a lot of other people might be missing that because it's not right away. Oh, 60 days. So, just finding out kind of what their time frame is, because what that gives you is context on how you're going to structure options for them. Amount owed on the property. So, if we buy the property, will we need will we need to pay off any taxes, liens, or mortgage? Basically it's a way that I can ask at this stage something more about, personal. A lot of times if you ask this too quickly, people don't want to give you that information. But now you've gone through this, they've gotten to know you, and now here at this stage, you can start getting into more of the financial picture of where they're currently at. Home value. So now here's what happens. This is the way my team works, and this is going to get into some of your questions about comping properties. I want to get a gauge at this stage, if they have any idea of what their property is worth. So I haven't done my research yet, but considering the condition, and I repeat, some of the things that they had said, do you have any idea of what your property might be worth, or what you would need to get? Sorry,
I got the questions. I got it.
is that asking price? So however you phrase that, but the reason why that's there is I want to see, where they're at in terms of their expectations. And while they're doing that, I have two screens on. I'm looking at comps. I'm looking at cash sales, okay? So not necessarily ARV, after repair value. I want to be looking at cash sales. So similar to properties that are similar to theirs based on the condition that I want to see what cash buyer, like people are paying cash for. And the reason why is because that's going to give me a very quick determination what buyers are buying for. It's cash sales, right? After repair value, I am not a general contractor. I am not someone who can go in and tell you the cost of a rehab in a market I've never been to. I don't even know. Like a lot of the guys that we work with, they have crews and they get it cheaper and all this other stuff. I look for cash sales, and that's where I start. And I look at ARV afterwards, that sort of thing. If there's no cash sales, but we start looking for cash sales. And when I start seeing this, I go through. I'm like, okay, well, I get them, and lots of times they don't know the value. So what I start doing then is I start saying, okay, hey, that property that's selling over on 123 Main Street, or John, Main Street, the street right next to you. Okay, well, there's a house that looks very similar to yours, and then I kind of go over here, setting an anchor price, right? So I'm setting an anchor here. Well, I see that house sold. It looks like it sold for all cash, which means it's an investor most likely that bought the property, and it sold for 60,000. Now, that doesn't matter. Like whatever that person is wanting to sell their property for, I mean, they could tell me $150,000 they want to sell their property for. If I see a cash sale that's sold for 60,000, that's close to their property, I'm going to say 60,000, and I'm going to, very important, stop. I'm going to pause. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to wait. And at this point in time, again, you're not physically there, so you have to listen for the auditory cues. You have to listen for the size, or, oh, I'm not going to do that. Oh, you're not going to do that. And find out why the 60,000 is not right. So We go through, very important. So I start lower. I always, kind of go $10,000 below or whatever you choose there to do that. Let's just say now we're moving to negotiation. And lots of times this does happen on the first or second phone call for us, in a very short period of time. And so we start going through. So if we can cover all closing costs, fees, commissions for you, and close in a time frame that works best for you, what's the best price that we can do? And again, depending on, you have to judge the way the call is going here with this. You may not use that right away. You may leave that for later. If they say yes, go and move to close. If it's a bad price, go over again what needs to be done, and ask them for more clarity on their situation, and start using things like deciding factors, and like what would be the deciding factor for today versus tomorrow, those sorts of things. And when you get to the close, very important here for us is we always use the marination process, and it's very similar to what happens to you, using the car salesman analogy again. When you do the test drive and you're sitting there while the car dealer gets up and he's like, let me go talk to my manager and see what I can do. He leaves you sitting there, right? He's letting you marinate. And while you're marinating there, you're thinking of all the other things, and they're talking about God knows what, not reducing the price anymore on the car. But then they come back and you've thought so much about that car. You're looking around the dealership and you're thinking, what you've done, if you set this up correctly with the picture perfect, the pain points, all of those things, is now they're marinating and they're thinking about, oh, this is what I can do with this money. I can put it aside right now in this time where everything is so turbulent and we don't know, there's all this uncertainty. I can put this money aside, and I can do this and I can do that, and oh, I can move to this place that, so all of this stuff is happening while you either go on hold and talk to a manager, or you say, let me call you back in 5 or 10 minutes and let me see what I can put together for you. And then basically from there, you just go through, and one of the things that we say here, and I should probably put this in because it's something I teach, is that, the deciding factor, which is there on the third to or fourth to last paragraph, is so important. What is the deciding factor for you today in closing or signing a contract today versus tomorrow, right? Is it price? And if it's price, what can we do maybe that would subsidize or maybe there's non-monetary things that we can do, like helping with the move, or perhaps you just move and you take the stuff and then we'll clear the rest of it out. Just take what you want and leave the rest. And there's things that you can do there to try and offset price as well. So I know I'm running through it. I've missed a lot of stuff here, I know. But I wanted to be somewhat thorough and get through it quickly for you all. But this is what works for us. It's not going to work for everyone, and you're going to have your different takes on it. But take what you like from it again and just try to implement a few things.
Awesome. It's a great structure. So hopefully you got some basic sales process, just an outline, a blueprint, and now some more scripting. So double scripting for you. So that should help. Now I want to go, the last two parts of this call is really what's different between face-to-face and buying over the phone. There's a couple things that I think are important to talk about. And then just some different tips as far as strategy goes and things like that when buying virtually or over the phone. So we're going to transition from the scripting and basic sales process to the differences, and then some I think the 3 or 4 most important tips and strategies when going virtual or buying completely over the phone. So we're going to make a transition here. First thing I want to talk about, and again, I know we're moving really quick, but we're an hour into this. There's a ton to cover, so we're just trying to pack it all in, and a recording will be set out. So first thing we want to talk about here is you lose the physical ability to read the seller, and you can't see the home. I mean, those are probably the 2 biggest things that kind of freak people out about going completely virtual. So Greg, Steve, or both of you, do you want to kind of talk about how you deal with those things?
Totally. So let's just kind of get clear on like, to make this simple for everyone, John, bring up like number one concern, and then I can talk about how I handle it, just so we can give everyone like crystal clear, like if this, that.
Yeah. So if I'm bringing up a deal killer to you.
Yeah, like ability to read seller or whatever, something like that. So
yeah, here we go. So, yeah, Greg, I just don't know. I don't know.
you don't know, as in like what we just are you role playing with me, or are you like
role playing with you?
Oh, I was like, all right.
Let's say you get a wishy-washy. So how to read the seller. So let's hit that. So you're not face to face. You don't see them. So one thing might be like, we're talking and Greg, you're doing your thing. You think it's going pretty well. And then I say something like, Greg, man, I just don't know. I don't know.
I get it. I mean, John, listen, I kind of feel the same way if I were you. It sounds like the number one. So first things first, I would attempt to figure out what their objection is. It sounds like the number one thing you're concerned about now is that you probably think this is too good to be true and you're not sure how we're supposed to even buy your house without ever seeing it. So I'm going to make an assumption on what their objection is. This is going back into deal killers and emotional intelligence. And so let's continue this role play. John, it sounds like, you want to sell your house, you're considering an offer, but you're really just not convinced that someone's really able to buy your house without even seeing it.
No, man, it's not that. I know, the internet and all those things, all kinds of crazy stuff happens today. What I'm really struggling with is, I don't know how long this takes or how much time I have to find a new place or when I get my money or any of that stuff. And without that stuff, I just, there's no way I can pull the trigger.
I get it, man. I get it. So really, I'm sorry if I, was mistaken here. I mean, it sounds like you understand the process. Obviously, you want to sell your house. We talked about the price and things like that. But, until you really have a crystal clear picture on what's going to happen after you sell the house, it sounds like until you find that out, there's nothing you can really do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think anyone could do anything.
Okay. So let me tell you this. If I was able to, and obviously if you don't feel comfortable at all, that's totally fine. This is your decision to make. If I was able to share with you a couple ideas on, how we could really kind of help you go from this house that we'd be purchasing to wherever you want to get to. I know you shared with me earlier, you want to get down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If I can help you with that, and then that can hopefully plant some certainty in your mind, I mean, would that help you, at least make this decision today on if you'd like to do this or not?
Well, man, if we had a plan and I was confident in that plan, then I think that's a step forward. We need to agree on a few different things, but we definitely need a plan.
Understood. Well, listen, let me go back in here. I want to really get you crystal clear because I know your big concern is like, you shared with me you haven't done this in, 30 years, the time you've been living in this house. So really want to get crystal clear on, how we can help you. So anyway, pause role play.
Yeah.
That's what I've tried to do.
Let me jump in here. So what Greg was doing is, how do you read the seller when you're not sitting there in front of them? So I think one thing, I'll put this into words, one tactic Greg uses is if you're missing something, just make an assumption and the seller will either confirm your assumption or they'll correct you. So Greg's was, hey, listen, and I can't remember what the assumption was, but it was wrong with what was in my head. And I said, no, man, it's not that, it's this. And I volunteered it. So is that what you're going for, Greg?
That's it.
Exactly. So just to put that into a rule or a takeaway, when you're kind of stranded or stuck, make an assumption. I always like to say I could be wrong. Make an assumption and then just shut up. And they will correct you or they'll confirm your assumption. Could be, listen, I'm guessing no matter how we adjusted the price or what we did with the offer, and I could be wrong, wouldn't be the first time, but I'm guessing no matter what we did with the offer, there's no way you're even close to being prepared to getting ready to sell your house in the next 60 to 90 days. And that's how I'm going to find out if I've got a price issue, an offer issue. Yeah. They might say, no, offer's good. Here's the deal, John. And then I figure it out. Or they can say, yeah, everything sounds good. I'm just like $5,000 off and I can't get over it. I don't feel like, I can move forward. And we can figure out. So make an assumption you know, I could be wrong, but make an assumption and then just shut up and you'll be surprised at what you hear. Great tactic to use if you're hearing pauses, if you're hearing some wishy-washy stuff, if you feel like you're losing traction, if you know you're not close to closing the deal. That's a good way to dive in and figure out, what are we missing here? Is it a deal killer? Is it a motivation thing? What's happening?
Totally.
Steve, do you have anything to add to that, or should we move on to the next?
Well, yeah, just I think people tend to overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something super important for us, is just keep it simple. The KISS model, because, you know, if someone says, well, I don't know, I'd say, oh, what don't you know?
Exactly. So I think
Sure.
one big takeaway from this whole call is keep it simple. You heard a lot of scripting. You don't have to use that scripting. Some of the most valuable and effective scripting is just to say nothing at all, or a really, or a huh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. So,
Yeah,
so don't
no, it's like,
complicate it.
huh.
Most of my sales calls were basically grunts and one-word questions.
Oh,
Questions
absolutely.
or statements, and that got me where I needed to go. So let's move on to what else is different. Steve, if you wouldn't mind covering this next one.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, listening is, it is the most important sense that you have when it comes to doing this virtually. And it's not just listening to the conversation that's happening, you know, it's trying to listen to what, you know, many layers deep, and it's the game beneath the game, the conversation below the conversation. And there's, you know, a lot of people, and if you can understand this one thing, you'll start to understand a lot about the way people think and operate, is that a lot of people they're completely oblivious to exactly what they're saying. They'll say, I want a price of X, and they won't know why they want a price of X. They'll say something as an objection, but they won't know why they're even saying that, other than they feel like they just have to say it. So they're completely unconscious in the conversation. And so where listening becomes super important is, okay, well, whatever somebody says to me, immediately I'm just dismissing that, because that's the first thing that they thought of. That it doesn't really mean anything a lot of times. What I'm looking for are cues. I'm looking for context around why they said that. And so you can listen by listening and asking questions. So like mirrors and labels are great ways to do this. So Chris Voss talks about this. Fantastic book, great audio book. He does a master class on masterclass, which is actually really engaging and interesting as well. But he does this in to uncover more, right? And to basically set the context of where someone's at and why they're saying what they're saying. So, you know, in the previous example, John said, well, I don't know. And my response would be like, you don't know? And what happens there is that that's a mirror. And so I would mirror maybe 2 or 3 times the last, you know, few words that someone says, and then I would add a label. Well, John, it sounds to me like you're unsure right now. And John would start talking. Or it sounds to me like you're scared right now. That is a very real thing that people are going to be feeling right now in this market, in this, you know, what's going on globally. It sounds to me like you're X. And what happens there is you start kind of going through this, and it's mirror, mirror, label, mirror, mirror, label. And what happens is you start uncovering the truth, whatever that is, the pit of pain that they have, that sort of thing. And what you're listening for, again, are the sighs, the shuffles, yeah, I don't know. And those sorts of things is really what you're trying to pick up on. And the more you can get someone to talk, you know, the better the conversation is going to go.
And let me give an example of this. Let me give a real world. Steve, will you role play with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me show you what I mean, or what Steve means by just going into that kind of autopilot and saying stuff without knowing what it's very real. And you're going to see an example of it right here. It happens to all of us in our everyday lives. So we're in role play now. I'm going to start with Steve. Steve, how's it going today?
Yeah, good, John.
Good, good. Man, when you say good, what do you mean?
Oh, so you got me there.
That's it. See, he went into good without even thinking twice about it. But now we just interrupted it and forced to expand on it and go a level deeper. So we do this every day, all day long. But that just snapped you out of it like that. And now you're actually answering the question. You actually had to pause and go, shit, how am I doing?
Well, so this is what went through my head. Good. And like, okay, what's good? I'm like, oh, it's a blue sky outside. We just moved into a new office and I have this beautiful view and life's pretty good. And I wasn't thinking that before. And that's the thing that people have to understand is that I just immediately responded. And until you said, good, what's good? I didn't even know. And now you just elevated my emotion. I'm thinking that, damn, like all this stuff's going on and I'm actually pretty happy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a perfect example there.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I felt like when you were talking about how people just answer and they're not even thinking about, we do it all the time. So I just wanted to shine a light that happens all the time. Yeah. And so it's a very real thing. It's not that sellers are weird or that they don't think. It's just that's how we're built. We have these automatic answers, and if we're going to dive deeper, we got to kind of pause that and go that one step deeper.
And they use another thing too with people on this call to really help get this into action immediately, because learning a new skill takes time. All these strategies and tactics we're sharing today, like you can do this in your personal life too. Like you can use Socratic questions and talk to your spouse or talk to your kids, and you're going to be very surprised on the conversations that you're going to have, or even talking to someone when you're getting groceries or whatever. I mean, this stuff is just universal communication. We just happen to be using it, in a business context with buying properties off sellers. So it's
Greg,
all.
I would argue that
applicable.
We do that already with our normal conversations. Again, if I ask my kid, how was school? And the kid says, fine. What do we ask as parents? Like, well, what do you mean it's fine?
What do you mean by fine? Yeah.
Right? That's how we typically communicate. All we're saying here is communicate like a normal human being on a sales call, right?
Yeah, just be normal, isn't that?
And lots of great stuff will happen. You'll find out enough to put good deals together.
That's it. The one caveat I will give. Oh, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
I was going to say one thing here, guys, and if anyone here has kids, they are going to be one of the best. Even a spouse, but if you have a child, practice this with them, especially if they're 3 or 2. I would drive home from my son's daycare and I'd be like, oh, how was daycare? And okay, well, what'd you do? And that would be my next question. Well, what did you do? Did you play? Did you do this? Did you do that? And I filled in the blanks. Then I can't remember where I heard this, but I would say driving to school, I was like, hey, this isn't working. I'm not getting anything from them. And I'd say, how was your day? And he'd say, good. And I'd say, good. And I'd pause. And then immediately after, a 3-year-old starts telling you about their day. I drew a picture. You drew a picture. And they start telling them about the picture. And then all of a sudden it's this thing and it's this big story. And then they did all these other things. Adults are no different.
Totally, man.
I think that's great. It's basic communication, and that's sales. Is open, honest communication. If we could read people's minds, we could sell anything. We're just getting as close to mind reading as possible, getting as close to pure, open, honest communication as possible. So next, let's talk about doing live evaluations, comps, sending offers. Steve touched on this a little bit, but Steve, Greg, do you have anything to add about being virtual with the evaluation comps and sending offers that you think would be useful?
Yeah. Here's something that I've implemented, and I think it actually is getting me a deal as of today. I got the lawyer on the phone after this training calls off. Sometimes, like, you have to, and this really is a personal preference, but if some people don't want to cooperate if they don't want to answer questions, they just want to hear an offer, and that happens from time to time. What I do in that situation is sometimes I'll just give them an offer. Like, if they will not go through the sales process, I'm like, you know what, I might as well give them an offer. Sometimes, this happens more if you're virtual because you're not going to set that appointment. I'll just make an offer and kind of hope for the best. That's the last thing I do. I obviously try to lead with the sales process. And, in that situation, if they truly just want an offer, they don't want to talk, or they want to talk after they hear your offer, go ahead and just make an offer. And, in terms of comps and stuff like that, I make a reasonable offer that's not going to offend them, but it's something that I can probably buy the house at. And, and I'm assuming there's going to be some work. So, worst case scenario, if they genuinely want to sell, but they don't want to talk, just give them an offer, and you can give a range if you want to kind of, have it be, dependent upon certain things. And I did that. The guy wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't go through the motions, and that happens. And I made him an offer, and he took it, and then his attorney's calling me now. So it's like, not now, literally, but worst case scenario, if they will not cooperate, this is like the last thing that I personally do. And this is more kind of like just kind of velocity house buyer standard procedure. But don't be afraid to do that if that's the last thing that really you can do, if they won't speak on the phone or if they just want to text or whatever. So I've seen that work, been a little successful for me. So I'm sure, other folks on this call will run into that from time to time.
Yeah, a couple of tools. MLS is always a great way to comp properties. Now, depending on whether or not you have it or not, but there's REI Automator, and
Great
a bunch
software.
of other. What's that? Yeah, it's a good software.
Awesome.
There's a lot of different features in there from marketing, fulfillment, and stuff like that you can utilize. But it will help you just understand, even if you're not in your market, a different market, what's selling in the area and that sort of thing. And there's other software tools around there as well that can help you derive somewhat of a quick calculation there. I'd always just say, err on the side of caution, use a 10% or so variance there just in case. Like I always say, use a range. John, look, I see that we could probably come somewhere between, $100,000 to $130,000. Is a price in there somewhere? Would that work for you? If we can accomplish X, ABC, that sort of thing. The other thing I think it's important to bring up here, and I see a couple questions here. One of the things that, we started off, especially when we were newer, and we still do this from day, like Greg and I are possibly working on a deal right now, but is using other people who have more experience than you to help you with this, right? And a lot of times we want to I want to keep, especially now in this market more than ever, you need to leverage people that have spent the time, the money, the resources that you can leverage their experience in this market to really get you that best offer, so that you're not losing the deal, right? And we do a lot of joint venture, like Greg and I, like we're possibly working a deal in New Jersey.
Yeah.
We have connections all around North America as well. So we do a lot of JVs as well with other people, and just even connecting them with people that could help them. And you make less on the deal, but at least you're not losing it too.
Right. And you know what? We talked before this call, and if you guys, there's a lot of questions popping up. We're going to get to Q&A and answer as many as possible. Greg and Steve are both doing this. They do partner with people, each other actually, but others all the time. So if you want to reach out to either of them because you have a question or you need help on a deal, they're open to that. We can distribute email addresses or handle it however Greg and Steve want to handle it, but they're an amazing resource, and they give. And if you need help on a deal, they will help you with the deal. So, they're out there for you. So I know there's a lot of questions we're not going to get to today because I've seen 1,000 and we just can't go on for 6 more hours, but they will jump on deals with you and help you through them. We talked about this before the call, and they said, yeah, I have no problem with that. So keep that in mind. Is that okay that I said that, Greg and Steve, before I popped off like that and just opened you up to 300?
Yeah, I mean, if they have a property or something, I whether it's me to buy or want me to help you wholesale it. I mean, if it's a good deal, I mean, I would look to buy it, myself, so you could wholesale me stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've done so many JV deals, and that's really how I changed my business model from wholesaling to actually like rehabbing. It's like I accumulated a decent amount of capital from JVing to then buy them myself. So yeah, I mean, that's totally cool.
Yeah, same here. 50% of what we do is JVs, and that's just been a standard for us from day one. So all that we really ask is that you are direct with the seller. There's a lot of daisy chains going on there, and that's okay. We're fine with that. but oftentimes it does create a lot of confusion there. So if you're direct with the seller, and if you have a contract in place even, and you're not sure, you don't have the buyers in place right now, because I know a lot of buyers are also a little more reluctant on whether or not to buy at this time, if it's the right time. We have some pretty big players in the real estate market space that are buying, and in all markets. So yeah, it's totally open to it. Yeah, I'll send you my information afterwards, and we can connect that way, I guess.
Yeah, so what I'll do after this call, when I send the recording out, I'll just send whatever the best way is to get a hold of these two guys. So that'll be, I won't put you on the spot and ask for email addresses or anything now. We'll just, whatever the best way is after this. I do want to, at the end of this thing in the Q&A, talk about, I saw a question pop up about coronavirus specifically. What kind of language are we crafting around that? My gut is it's going to still flow through the same language you've been using for years about uncertainty and those types of things, but we can touch on it when we get to Q&A. I think that's something really important to hit today specifically. Let's push forward. I think we got just a couple slides left, and then we'll be hitting Q&A. I'll touch on this one for all of 60 to 30 seconds. Someone asked while Steve was going through his script, he goes, "Hey, this sounds like more than 7 minutes. Well, how do we wrap our heads around that?" You can set the stage in chunks. You don't want to get somebody on the phone and say, let's say that if you do a deal, that's a 45-minute call. You don't want to say, "Hey, you got 45 minutes," because no one's going to say yes. So you set the stage in chunks. You set the stage like, "Hey, let me ask some basic questions about the house. I want to answer any questions you have." Takes 4, 5, 6 minutes. After that, if you want to take it a step further, I'll kind of explain what the next part of the conversation is and how long that takes, and you can just tell me if you want to move forward or not. No big deal either way. And there it goes. And then you're at the end of that first stage, right? You do some basic upfront questions, and then everything's sounding good. "Hey, listen, my 4 minutes is up. It sounds like we've got some potential here." The next part of the conversation is just diving a little bit deeper into your situation so we can figure out how we can structure the deal, get you the most money, a few more questions about some specifics with the house. That takes about 10 or 15 minutes. Do you want to go ahead and move the conversation there? And see how you can just set the stage in chunks. And then when you do that, you're also staying true to your word as you do that and building more and more trust because you said you're going to do something and then you do it. Does that make sense? I know I saw that question a few times, so I wanted to make sure to answer it here. Okay.
Yeah.
Slow the call down. Guys, want to handle this quickly, how to quickly engage with the seller. Steve, I think you touched on this, but if there's anything you want to add.
Sure. Yeah, so, a couple things here. I think we have I know that we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. John, I know that, you are where you are right now, and you've taken complex things and you made them simple. And really, when you think about this from a seller's perspective, they're looking at this need of having to sell, and what you want to do is you want to make it simple. And if you're flying through a conversation, that's just creating more anxiety, right? So really starting to, maybe you're faster at the beginning, but then as you start going through things, you start slowing it down and you start really having a good conversation with someone. Lots of times you can have a conversation really about nothing, and you continue talking and they'll start listening, and so as you slow the call down and your voice and your tempo, it's becoming more of a hypnotic sort of experience, but you're slowing things down. And a lot of times what that does is it engages with people, and you'll get a lot of yeses and, "Oh yeah, no, that's right," and all these other things. If you're flying through phone calls, you're missing it, right? And all you're doing is talking. So very important, if you find that your tempo is getting up because sometimes you get anxious, or maybe it's a really good deal and like you're close and it's like, okay, let's get this thing signed, is telling yourself just to slow down and take your time, right? And because that's how you miss things is if you're going too quick.
Awesome. Greg, anything to add there? Are you good?
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Slow down to speed up. I mean, it's like, if you really understand the sales process, the sales process will disqualify people that you can help but that will then qualify people that you can help. And then it's obviously worth your time to spend with the people you could genuinely help. And that's why, we keep preaching the sales process, is because it's designed a specific way to have the right conversation with the right people without having that assumption like, oh, they're not motivated, they're not giving me their house in the first 2 minutes. It's like, no, we use the sales process to, and that would be great. I would love to create a software that sells that, honestly, because it would sell quickly, anyway. But yeah, I mean, you're using that sales process to determine your outcome. And, I think a lot of people are scared to get to the truth. And it's like, well, if they're not going to sell to you and they're not a fit, why don't you find that out? And then you genuinely help them. Like, I write in my sales copy, and this works really well. I've had people call me when they didn't call other investors, because I write in the sales letter, even if I don't buy your property, I promise our conversation will be helpful regardless. So you can call in and I promise I'll point you in the right direction. And I get people calling me all the time saying, oh, I saw that part of your sales letter, I called. And, you want to genuinely lead with value, no matter what you're doing.
Yep.
Love it. All right. I think this is our last slide before Q&A, I believe. Distribute motivation and deal killer steps throughout the conversation. I put this in there because when we talked about sales process, and even when you saw the scripting, it was very structured, right? It was set the stage, we're doing the virtual tour, building rapport, then we're talking about motivation, then we're talking about deal killers. The way this really plays out is you kind of sprinkle those things throughout. You might be talking about a house, and they're talking about the kitchen, and they go, oh yeah, the kitchen's a wreck. Well, you might dip your toe right there into motivation. We say a wreck. What do you mean? Oh, well, this and that. How long has that been going on? Is that the only thing? And you're starting to get into motivation. Is that a big deal? Man, what's that like? And then, you're starting to get there. Or maybe they might say something like, I'd love, this house is great. It's actually in really good condition, but I'd love to be on the west side. Well, now we're getting into picture perfect. Well, why the west side? What's going on? And you can dip your toe in the water there. You might hear something throughout the conversation just naturally, like, I've gotten your letters for 2 years, but I've just kind of been scared to call. Okay, we've got a hidden deal killer. Let's figure out what it is. So instead of so structured, you need to be okay with, you might do a little problem question here, some picture perfect there, some impact, some deal killers, and you're putting all the pieces together as you go. So I know a lot of people, when they start to implement a good sales process, they get so worried about the rigid structure without realizing that these are just all the pieces of information we need. It's okay if we collect them at different times. It's okay if someone starts volunteering something to go down that rabbit hole with them right away. You don't want to be walking through a house and someone says, I've been dying to get rid of this thing. And you go, whoa, hold on. We can't talk about that for 10 minutes, right? That's crazy. Like, tell me.
That's part of the motivation. What are you talking about?
Right. Like, you're not following our sales process. Hold on. That's step 2. We're on step 1. Like, it's okay, right? Give yourself that leeway. This is just real life happening. So that's the last piece I wanted to end on. Before we go into it is, you do want to always start with setting the stage, because you're relieving pressure so you can have that conversation. And you do want to get as much of motivation as you can before the deal killers, because that's how we can reframe. I know you say you're scared of this, but you got all these big problems. What's more important to solve? Won't go too deep into that, but just give yourself some leeway and don't be afraid to be a little unstructured. Let's see. This is the final slide. Greg, disqualifying retail leads. I know you just talked about this, so actually we'll pass it because you just hit that with your last slide, and we'll end with this one: credibility and certainty that we're going to be able to get the deal done. I know you guys both had some things to say on credibility, so let's talk credibility real quick and move to Q&A.
I want to just, before, I'll have Steve has a good point on this, so I'll let him kind of really drill this home, but I want to kind of share like a case study on like a virtual deal where I never met the guy. And, we had motivation was a, condemned house in Middletown, yada, 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 wanted to sell. He was so motivated. He brought 20 grand to the table, which was the wholesale fee. So that was a legitimately motivated seller. But the big deal killer originally was price. And I said, well, listen, if you want the most money, are you comfortable selling to someone else who might not be able to close? And he's like, yes. So he goes ahead and sells to another wholesaler. The guy can't buy the property. He calls me back like a month later and he's like, hey, I can't, this guy can't close. And I said, well, it sounds like, at this point in your situation, leaving a bit of money on the table, or actually bringing money to the table in this guy's situation is going to be more important than trying to get the most money and taking the risk of dealing with someone who, probably can't do what they say they're going to do. And he's like, you're absolutely right. So I said, listen, man, and this is where we're going to, I tie in the reframing. I said, listen, is knowing that a credible buyer who's been around for a while is going to buy your house and get you, get this problem solved. Is that worth having your dad, because it was his dad's house, bring 20K to the table? Is it worth that expense? And he said, it absolutely is. And I said, I'm going to close on the house. And then we ended up, double closing. So essentially the credibility and the certainty got me the deal over somebody else who offered more money. So like point number one is that a lot of the times it's really not about the money. And point number two, that was all virtual. So like the guy didn't know me from Adam. I could have been living in, South America under a rock. And, but I knew what his objections were. And I just wanted to restate those objections back to him to get him to confirm that and then show him a way that I could solve his problem. So this stuff works, guys. I mean, there's 300 something people on this call. This is powerful stuff.
I want to talk to the person who is just getting started, or perhaps has been doing this for a little while, or even the people that have been doing it for a while. But credibility, when first starting is, that is like a big giant elephant in the room, right? And to kind of go back to, we started from Vancouver in Austin, Texas, by doing this one very simple thing, and it's asking for help. So, we found people in Austin who, we shared a lot of the same core values and had a lot of the same visions and aspirations, and these synergies where we could help, both parties could help each other move ahead. And we would do all like the front end work, and we would move these properties over to them, and they'd help us kind of, negotiate and those sorts of things if needed. But when it was time to actually go sell the property or whatever, we would be using them, right? And that's how we built confidence in ourselves. It also, is how we built credibility within the marketplace as well. Because over time you start learning from these people, right? And it's all about leverage. It's leveraging people, networks around you to grow your business. Money loves speed. Speed and certainty. Those are the two things that our business operates on. Is we want to move as quickly as possible, and we want to move it with as much certainty as possible into whether it's a market or on a deal or whatever the case is. And if we're tied up in this, kind of middle ground where it's no man's land, that's not a good place for us. So how we get there, we've spent a lot of money, paying people for mentorship and coaching and those sorts of things. We've done a lot of different seminars, and these are the types of things that we have done in order to get to where we are. But it all starts with like leveraging other people's experience. John's sales trainings, Greg's business, my business, whatever. Find the person in your market who is doing this, and they're going to want to work with you. I will work with you. Greg will work with you. I mean, there's a lot of people out here that have the experience that you're seeking and can help you.
Awesome, man.
Totally.
Let's move.
Here's one more tip. Hey, John, can I share one more tip? This will really help just a few people here to piggyback off Steve. It'll take a second.
Go ahead.
If you're a new investor, this is something I did when I got started, and similar to what Steve did, is I would work with a lot of guys who had experience, and I would leverage their credibility on my behalf, because I'd usually wholesale them the property. So if you're scared that you can't close or you haven't been around, make sure it's okay with the other investor and use their experience and knowledge or whatever to share with the seller, because at the end of the day, you're like partnering with that guy. So that's
we did a $1 million property in Austin, Texas because of that one thing.
Yeah.
Let me jump. We're gonna move into Q&A. Austin, yours is right on the top of the screen, so I'm gonna hit yours. For those of you that know our sales process, 1 or 2 actionable steps. Let me give you the 2 actionable steps I will give you right now to move into going virtual with the sales process. Number 1, get really good and focus a lot of attention on that virtual walkthrough. That right there is going to build a lot of the rapport and take away a lot of the kind of the yucky, uncomfortable parts about going from when you can read someone face to face to being over the phone. You're going to feel this incredible urge to rush through the call because you're going to be going through your questions lightning quick. They're going to have short answers, and your calls are going to be short and not very productive. But if you focus at the beginning as transitioning on that virtual walkthrough, that can take 5, 10, 15 minutes. You'll build a ton of rapport, and you'll be right back at your normal pace. So first thing I would do is say, we're going to try to use the sales process, but let's go all in and just have the best virtual walkthrough we can. Cause I think you'll find your rhythm, during that actual virtual walkthrough. As a second action item, as a major action item, let me think if there's another one I would recommend. I would say setting the stage in chunks would be the next one, because you're going to be, it'll make you feel okay taking a longer time on the phone by starting with a 4-minute chunk or a 3-minute chunk, or hey, I got 3 quick questions to ask you. It just takes a second, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. Hey, next part of the conversation is this. Hey, I've got a good idea for where you are, what you're trying to accomplish. I can put a quick offer together. It's going to take me about 15 minutes to shoot you an email and outline this offer. I want to put it in writing for you. I don't like to just do it over the phone. I want you to see it as I go through it. Do you have time for that? So those would be the big 2 things. And I know they seem simple, but you've got sales process. So to aid in the transition is going to be the virtual walkthrough and then setting the stage in chunks. And those chunks might be a couple different a couple different calls. It might be a couple different pieces of the same call. But I think those are the 2 main things that are going to help you slide right into that virtual stuff, Austin. I hope that helps. Okay, so we are now at Q&A. I've only got a handful of minutes left.
Hey, can I saw a question. So John, yeah, a couple minutes left. I mean, yeah, an hour turns into 2. And so I hope people are finding value with this, because I know I sure am. But the whole Corona pandemic question came up there, and like, well, how do you handle this? You know, again, it kind of comes down to, well, let's just think through this for a second. One thing I wanted to bring up too is before getting on a phone call, kind of know what outcome you're looking for, right? Like, have a game plan in place. And so, you know, going into calls and knowing what kind of objections or whatever, you know, objections you might have to handle ahead of time is super important. The Corona pandemic, people, I can tell you right now, are in fear. Okay, so solve that. Okay, how do you solve that? It's uncertain. Financial, like all these different things, right? Is it safe to even sell my house right now? I don't want people coming into my house right now. How are you going to buy my house by not coming into it? So these are all very real challenges that, you know, I've probably spent most of my weekend trying to figure out. And this is what I've come up with. Okay, so I won't get too far into it because there's a whole kind of new contract that I'm working on, and a couple of other things. But, you know, I address it up front, right at the very beginning. Look, this is a very uncertain period of time, something that I've never personally seen before in my lifetime, and I'm sure you haven't either. So, you know, I want you to know in advance, given what's going on in the world, we've thought it out. We've been methodical in our approach, and we have solutions for you based on whatever your comfort level is right now. And depending on whether or not now is the right time to sell for you, if it is, we can make that work. And there's a couple different options that we can do. Obviously, depending on your level of comfort of whether or not you want people coming into your home or not, that's your choice. If the answer is that you don't want people coming into your house, here are some, you know, I'm going to need you to take some pictures and some photos and fill out this, you know, very simple property condition report, and I'll send that to you. And it's going to tell you exactly how we want the photos done and those sorts of things. Secondly, if you're not wanting to move during this period of time, we can structure a contract that's going to address all those things, perhaps even give you a little bit of money right now to close on the deal. The title will transfer hands, but we'll give you a little bit of money right now. And then the rest of the money you'll get after you vacate the house. And so what we're doing there is we're coming into a property with hopefully very little money, giving them the financial security to know, like, hey, look, you know, here's some money for you now, and then you can take care of your family. You can do those things that you're worried about, but and you'll get the rest of your money later. If there's a mortgage attached to that or whatever, like, there's different ways that you can do that. But it's addressing the actual very real situation now, and going through, okay, well, solutions, you know, those sorts of things right up front, and just handling those things in a way that, like, look, even if you don't know what the answer is, it's just saying like, let's figure this out. Let's figure out a solution, what works best.
Right.
And just, you know, trying to curb that right away.
And I want to answer this from just a pure, raw sales process point of view. Coronavirus is a deal killer. It's something that may or may not get in the way of a deal from closing if addressed or not addressed. So we would handle it like any other deal killer, right? We always want to proactively bring up the most common deal killers: relationships, risk, discomfort, those types of things. So I would bring it up. With some people, it's going to be a massive issue. With some people, it's not going to be an issue at all, and we don't even need to address it. You can simply bring it up like, listen, obviously coronavirus is everywhere. Big, you know, top of everyone's mind. Let me ask you this. What's on your mind in terms of selling and the coronavirus and you making this decision, and how is this playing a part in your decision? Just walk me through your thoughts on it. And you might get some that are, listen, we need to address time frame. We need to address people who come into the house. We need to address when we vacate, but we need money up front. Or might be crazy, but we're all on Facebook. You do also run into those people who are like, I don't care. Somebody made it up. I need to sell my house, right? So ask that question first, as you would a normal deal killer, to figure out what you need to address and what you don't need to address. Some pieces may be extremely important, but that's why you bring up deal killers. What do I need to address and how when I get to my offer? And then Steve has some amazing ways to address each of those major things. Steve, anything to add there?
No, I mean, that's great. I think it's just not overcomplicating the whole situation, right? And just, you know, really what you can, you know, the people who look at this and provide solutions are going to do the best in this market. And that means like people are going to have some crazy requests right now, and, you know, trying to come up with solutions to address those things. Like that's just, you have to adapt. You have to be agile. What we were doing, you know, 10 days ago is not what's happening now. It's an opportunity, as I see it. Everyone here is an opportunity to think outside the box and to get creative.
Yeah, as I started this call, I'll end this call because I think I know there's been lots of questions. I wish we can answer them all, but we just can't go like another 4 hours, and I'm sure either can you. Hopefully you found some value in this. That's the reason why we were doing it, but I'll end the call the way we started it. Right now is a tremendous opportunity to help a number of people who now have no other way to get some of the help that they desperately need. No, you know, retail real estate is shut down. There's not a lot of creative solutions there.
No.
This is the real estate creative solution spot right now, and I feel like real estate investors have a moral obligation and a responsibility to help who they can. Yeah. Now, it just so happens that there is a tremendous opportunity from a business perspective and all those things as well. But don't let that cloud that there's a real need out there more than probably any other time that I can think of in the real estate space for the exact service that you all provide. Yes, there probably will be some financial rewards, but you can't let that make you not help people. So I wanted to end with that. And I also wanted to thank Greg and Steve both for giving up 2 hours of their day. You know, I'm not paying them, I didn't ask them anything for this. They just both volunteered and said, hell yeah, let's do this. So if you guys wouldn't mind, give Steve and Greg a huge virtual round of applause. They were absolutely amazing. We are going to distribute this. I'll get with Steve and Greg if there's any other information they want to share as we get this replay out to you all. We'll distribute it on social and those types of things as well. Hopefully, you know, we'll get the chance to answer more questions too. We'll think through that if there's a good strategic way to answer those questions. And we'll put that in that email that goes out with the recording like that. So.
One more thing to add as we wrap this up, just for everyone listening, like at the end of the day, we just kind of summed it all up here. Just, you know, the sales process will help you close more deals. But at the end of the day, if you focus on genuinely leading with value and helping people and being upfront with them and really using the sales process as a bridge to get someone from where they are to where they want to get to, I mean, it will make everything, you know, lead with value first and always have the mindset of like, how can I truly help this person? If you go in with that mindset and you
100%.
combine that with the sales process, like how do I serve this person? whether it's buying their house or pointing them in the right direction, treating them like you would want to be treated in this situation. Because, you know, I'm big into, you know, getting into copywriting now. And like a big point of like that is like, put yourself in the other person's shoes and write from their perspective. So do this with these sellers, get empathetic with them, use the sales process, add some value, and in exchange for that, you're going to make some money. So John and Steve, it was an honor to do this with you guys today. Really, really got a lot from this.
Likewise, Greg and John. I don't know if people would find this beneficial, but I'll do it. It's not something I do a lot of. I've done it every once in a while, but I can, with Instagram, if people want this, I can do stories or Instagram lives or something like that with my team and watching us go through sales calls live. So you can learn from that perspective. I could do some little sales things here. I don't do any coaching or anything like that, but if people want that, I'll give you my Instagram as well. It's officially just Steve.
I love that name, man.
So, you know, if that's something you guys all want, I'll make a point of doing more of it, and we can handle some of these, you know, other questions or conversations around that as well. But John, honestly, you don't give yourself enough credit. Everyone, like John's boot camp, hands down, is going to go far more into detail about like some of the stuff that we're talking about. Like, this isn't a plug. This isn't anything other than, like, you need to do that if you want more information on this and what we're talking about right now, because to date, you know, I haven't found anything better.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. So Steve, Greg, we'll circle up after this and figure out everything we want to push out and get to everyone. So we'll get that done. Everyone on the call, thank you so much for being a part of this. MidwestRev.com is my website. So we have like 150 training videos on there as well, in case you want some more. Tons and tons and tons of training videos. Midwest, REV as in revenue.com. And we'll get you that information and tons of others as we get this recording out to you. Everybody, been a pleasure. Thanks for hopping on. See you around. Bye-bye.